So as I'm sure many of you have heard by now, Alec Baldwin, on the set of his new movie Rust that is in production, fatally killed a woman by shooting her. As we can see from this story from the BBC, Alec Baldwin fatally shoots woman with prop gun on movie set. So what exactly happened here? Now, the person who died in this case was 42-year-old Helena Hutchins. She was shot in the abdomen and flown to the hospital by helicopter, but ultimately died of her injuries. The other person who was shot and injured but has survived is the director of the production, Joel Souza, and he was taken from the scene by ambulance. So we have to ask ourselves, what exactly happened here? What was the circumstance under which these people were shot? Well, we have this from the New York Times. Alec Baldwin was rehearsing pointing gun at camera, affidavit says. While setting up the scene, the crew had to reposition the camera because there was a shadow. Mr. Russell told the detective that Mr. Baldwin was explaining how he was going to draw the gun, pulling it out from the holster when the firearm discharged. Mr. Souza, the director, told the detective that because the crew had been setting up the scene when the gun discharged, the incident had not been filmed. So it seems that somehow a live round was introduced into the firearm and shot, which subsequently killed and even injured somebody else. So people were asking, wait, how does this happen? I thought this was a prop gun. How do you kill somebody with a prop gun? Well, in Hollywood, a prop gun just means, it's property of whoever's providing the gun. It doesn't mean that it's fake. In fact, many of the guns you see in movies are actually real guns. They just might have been modified slightly depending on the type of gun they are, but we're going to get more into that later. So now we have to figure out who were the people that were responsible in providing the gun, ensuring that the gun was safe. Who were these people and how did they fail? Well, the first place you start to see issues is with the head armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reid. As you can see in this article from the Daily Mail, quote, "I wasn't sure if I was ready. The 24-year-old armorer who had doubts before being put in charge of guns on Alec Baldwin's film set, where he shot cinematographer dead after some crew walked out over safety." So we have a lot going on here. And you can see this is the 24-year-old woman, Hannah Gutierrez Reid, which immediately upon hearing, you're probably wondering, how does a 24-year-old woman become the head armorer responsible for all these guns on a film set? Now, it looks like it might be a case of nepotism. As you can see here, the person on the right is her father. He's well known in Hollywood as a legendary gunsmith and armorer. His name's Reid. And at just 24 years old, it doesn't seem like she had a lot of experience. In fact, about a month before this all happened, she was on a podcast called Voices of the West, where she talked about how she didn't think she was ready. She was scared she wasn't ready, and she had some other comments which we're going to get into. Take a look.
But I just finished up working on The Old Way with Nicolas Cage, his very first Western.
Oh, I heard about that.
And it was also my first time being head armor as well.
And how was that?
I was really nervous about it at first, and I almost didn't take the job because I wasn't sure if I was ready, but doing it, it went really smoothly.
How long have you been under the tutelage of your father, the great Reid?
So there you can say that she didn't want to take a job that she just took as head armor right before this filming of Rust, maybe only a few weeks before. And she characterized it as going very smoothly. But others on the set said otherwise. As you can see from this New York Post article, Rust armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reid once gave unchecked gun to 11-year-old actor. Gutierrez Reid's alleged misstep happened on the set of the upcoming Nicolas Cage film, The Old Way, and temporarily halted filming, sources told the Daily Beast. Quote, "She was reloading the gun on the ground where there were pebbles and stuff," one source told the outlet. "We didn't see her check it. We didn't know if something got in the barrel or not. She was a bit careless with the guns, waving it around every now and again," a source said. "There were a couple of times she was loading the blanks and doing it in a fashion that we thought was unsafe." A Rust production source described Reid as inexperienced and green to the outlet, adding that there had been 2 other incidents of accidental discharges by crew members. So despite production being allegedly halted in this last movie that she was involved in, she described it as going relatively smoothly. And with respect to this point that you just saw in the article, talking about how they saw her loading blanks into the firearm in a way that they felt uncomfortable with, Reid actually talks about this in the podcast as well. Take a look.
He took me from being completely green and taught me everything that I know so far. And, like, by all means, I'm still learning. But, yeah, Dad has taught me everything. But a lot of things, you know, I kind of just caught on by myself and everything. Like, just observation, watching him do things, or, like, just knowing how the firearms work. I think loading blanks was, like, the scariest thing to me because I was like, oh, I don't know anything about it. But, you know, he taught me that. And eventually, by the time I was, like, trying to figure out how to make a specific blank go when you want it to, rather than it hitting, like, the empty cylinders and everything, figured that out on my own.
Explain that process.
So normally if you, like, you know, you open the loading gate, you put the bullet in, you have to put it right around to right before. You have to bring that bullet, that blank, all the way around to right before the cylinder. So then that way the next time someone pulls back the hammer and shoots it, it'll go off. Yeah, and you have to, like, look at the front of it and determine which one is the blank if it's dummied up. You know, that's how I tell, at least.
Yeah. And in the other, in the rest of the cylinder, is it just dummy wads that are in there, or what?
Yeah, usually dummies. Sometimes if they don't see the dummies, they won't have me dummy it up. I try to dummy it up as much as I can.
Make it look real.
But some people really don't want you to dummy it for some reason, just out of their own, I don't know, how they want to feel comfortable, I guess.
So there you can see she talked about being uncomfortable loading blanks, especially into a revolver, it seems, where she talked about how she needed to put it in the right place so the next shot would be the blank. And for the other one, she would dummy it up. And here she's talking about dummy rounds, which the purpose of that is just to make the gun look like it's loaded with other bullets or with other rounds or cartridges. And this is just me speculating. This is just me guessing here based on what I've heard her say and things like that. But my guess is, in her attempt of trying to dummy it up, instead of putting a dummy round in there, she put live rounds in there. I don't know why live rounds would be present in a set like this, but that's what appears to be the case. Now, this wasn't just a one-off freak accident. As we already talked about, she had the issues on her previous set. But even on this set, union members walked off because of multiple firearm discharges that weren't supposed to happen. As you can see from this New York Post article, union members walked off Rust set over safety issues, text message claims. Union members walked off the set of Rust hours before Alec Baldwin fired a prop gun that killed the film's cinematographer and cited poor gun safety as one of the reasons for the move, according to a text message obtained by the Post. And we can read the text message here. The entire camera crew walked off that morning for that exact reason. Last night, we each wrote resignation letters. We cited everything from lack of payment for 3 weeks, taking our hotels away despite asking for them in our deals, lack of COVID safety, and on top of that, poor gun safety. Poor on-set safety, period. We wrote about this exact issue last night and walked this morning because of it. That's not in any of the papers. They brought in 4 non-union guys to replace us and tried calling the cops on us. Only people that stayed there were Helena, which is the woman who died, and Reid, the B steady op. She had a kid, man. I can't believe it. And I just have to say, when your head armor looks like this, is a 24-year-old girl whose father might be legendary, but she doesn't exactly have a lot of experience, maybe it's not the wisest decision to have her in charge of lethal weapons, especially when she's already had issues on other sets. Now, the other person we have to talk about is Assistant Director Dave Halls. Dave Halls, who you can see on the left here, and underneath you can see it say, a search warrant released Friday said First Assistant Director Dave Halls grabbed the gun from the cart and brought it inside to Baldwin, unaware that it was loaded with live rounds. Baldwin then aimed towards the camera and pulled the trigger, accidentally killing Hutchins, who's on the right, as she filmed him. Now, as I discussed already, it's not on film because they weren't filming at the time. This was an initial earlier story. But you see them talk about him grabbing this from the cart. Normally, the armorer would not be leaving guns on a cart for anyone to just come up and grab. But they're apparently claiming this might have been related to COVID protocols, which seems ridiculous, frankly. But this man also has had some issues fairly recently. You can see from this NPR article, the crew member who handed Baldwin a gun was fired after a mishap on set in 2019. The assistant director, this is Dave Halls, who we were just talking about, who handed Alec Baldwin, the gun that killed a cinematographer last week, had been fired from a previous job after a gun went off on set and wounded a member of the film crew, a producer said Monday. So this isn't the assistant director's first rodeo with him being on a set and being responsible, and then someone getting shot by a gun and injured under his tutelage. So already we have so many red flags in this case. I mean, we've got union members walking off. We've got 24-year-old inexperienced armorers. We've got guys fired from sets for basically the same exact sort of incident happening. And it's all coming together. It's all on the same set. You're just asking for problems at this point. And keep in mind, this is a low budget production. I guess this is like Alec Baldwin's project or something like that. It's a fairly low budget film, and it appears corners were cut. They were not getting the best of the best in this production. Now that we've discussed the facts of the case, I want to talk about the discussion surrounding this incident. A lot of people have been publishing their takes online, and Twitter has just been a shitstorm around this. And I saw people on the left and the right saying things that I just fundamentally disagreed with their takes on this. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but very particularly one thing that bothered me was this idea of, well, gun safety protocols, the same sort of gun safety protocols that you and I would have to follow as civilians when dealing with guns in our everyday lives. They should have been following that on a movie set, but that's just wrong. And I've seen everybody say this. For example, another article from the New York Post, we're citing them a lot in this video, but you have a gun expert. So you see Alec Baldwin ignored #1 rule of gun safety, Hollywood weapons expert. And you can see here, loaded or unloaded, a weapon never gets pointed at another human being, Hollywood firearms consultant Brian Carpenter of Dark 30 Film Services told the Post. For safety, all live firearms used in TV and film productions are typically aimed at a dummy point, not at equipment, cast, or crew, Carpenter noted. Guns, he said, are never aimed at a person. Another person who voiced this is Lauren Southern. She was responding to a tweet I made saying, all of this still confirms the fact that you need to treat a real firearm like a real firearm, no matter what you think is in it. And look, maybe this should be the case. Maybe CGI has advanced so much that you don't need to do this anymore. But the issue I take with this is some of the best films in Hollywood history did not follow this rule. And I'm going to name one in particular because it's one of my favorites. It's near and dear to my heart just because of how realistic it is. The movie Heat, directed by Michael Mann. And keep in mind, they're using real firearms in the scene I'm about to show you right now. Legendary scene.
Get down.
Now, the scene is obviously much longer than that. I mean, I highly recommend you see the movie if you've never seen it. I mean, this movie, so legendary, it actually inspired a lot of bank robbers who actually cited the movie as inspiration for why they did the type of robbery that they did, the North Hollywood shootout being a very famous example. But as you can see there's a very clear shot of Val Kilmer's character taking a gun loaded with blanks in a real gun, shooting directly at people. And I've seen some of these same people say, well, for the film crew, they have plastic shields and things like that that they utilize when blank firearms are being fired in their direction or near their direction or something like that. And that's generally true. You can actually see that here in this scene where the man on the left is holding a plastic shield while Val Kilmer's shooting, and then he moves away. But here you have another scene where Val Kilmer is shooting in the direction with blank rounds towards camera crew and staff, and they don't have any shields whatsoever. By the way, if you ever watch this movie, you're going to notice the gunfire in this movie does not really sound like the gunfire you've probably heard in any other movie. That's because in other movies, they are dubbing over the actual audio. They're using like gun sounds that they did in a studio or that have been recorded somewhere else. Whereas in this movie, everything that you heard was from the actual gunshots that they were doing in the city that day. It was production sound. Absolutely legendary. I can't hype that movie up enough. And again, those were real firearms. But typically, slight modifications have to be made in order to make the guns run with blank ammo. As you can see in this video from YouTuber Jeremy S., where he has blank ammo right here using a real gun that isn't modified. This is how a real gun would function unmodified with blanks.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a gunshot to me. I mean, as far as I can tell, with my ears on. Lots of nice fire, which is great for Hollywood, right? Where after that fireball, we want it to look like a gunshot, even if it doesn't feel like one. Woo! Great muzzle flash.
So as you can see there wasn't enough pressure, there wasn't enough gas pressure to force the firearm to cycle. So he had to manually cycle the action. So what they do to make the gun function with blanks is that they'll add little devices like this. You can see these little gold tipped devices that they would put at the end of a threaded barrel. And this brings down the diameter of the barrel to keep more of the gases inside the barrel to increase the pressure so that the gun will cycle. And then they hide that typically with a flash hider like this that you would see on a normal rifle so that you can't see how small the hole is. But of course, if you put a live round in that gun, it would still function and it would shoot right through that thing and put everybody in danger. So it's still a real gun with real danger. But when we're talking about the movie Rust, we're talking about a revolver, typically, because this is the time period. It's a Western. So you're dealing with revolvers, and revolvers don't need pressure in order to automatically cycle. They're not semi-automatic in that sense, although many revolvers still do fire with one pull of the trigger. But that's a function of you pulling the trigger, not based on recoil or gas pressure. So when you're dealing with revolvers on a movie set and they have to fire blanks, you're dealing with a real gun. And just to show you guys the difference between a live round and a blank round, here's the difference. So a live round has this projectile, which is this bullet tip. This is the thing that will fly through the barrel and kill somebody. That is the ingredient that a blank does not have. A blank has all the other ingredients of a normal round except this projectile. So usually a blank will have a crimped surface, or they'll have like a wadding, like a soft piece of paper or something at the front to hold the powder in. But then the rest, this is the propellant, this is the powder. Here you have the primer, which is ignited after being struck by the hammer or the firing pin, which then ignites all the propellant in here and sends the projectile flying, or in the case of a blank, it's just the powder that burns and creates hot gases and muzzle flash and all that stuff, and loud noises. But blanks have to be taken seriously too. At range, they're basically safe. But at close ranges, they can be quite deadly, and they can be deadly if there's anything in the barrel in front of that blank. In fact, many people incorrectly say Brandon Lee, who is Bruce Lee's son, died because of a blank. When in fact, as you can see here, Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, was killed in prop gun shoot. He was hit by a .44 caliber slug while filming a death scene. The gun was meant to be filled with blank rounds, but autopsy revealed a real bullet entered his body near his spine. And it's hypothesized that a dummy round, the bullet got lodged into the barrel, or the gun was used previously and there might have been a squib round, which is an underpowered round. The bullet got stuck in the barrel, or a fragment of a bullet got stuck in the barrel. And once they put the blank in, because they didn't inspect the barrel and clean it afterwards, that got shot. It propelled the projectile forward into Brandon Lee's body and killed him. And there's other dangerous things that happen on set. For example, Jessica Biel famously shot an arrow and destroyed a $300,000 camera on set. And look at that. She's laughing about it. Just destroyed $300,000 worth of equipment. No big deal. Let me take an Instagram pic or something. This is hilarious. Also, I saw people wondering, why was a cinematographer directly behind the camera, especially when a gun was involved? People seem to think these days that being behind the camera directly is not necessary in Hollywood productions anymore, that they just look at screens that are away from the camera. But that's just not true. Still on movies today, directors will stay behind the camera filming because that's just how they feel it should be done, even when guns are used on set. Granted, they typically will use extra protection, shields, and things like that if guns are actually loaded with blanks and fired very close to them. So where does Alec Baldwin's responsibility stand in all this? A lot of people saying, well, he should have checked the gun himself. Did he act irresponsibly, contrary to any instruction from his crew when dealing with the gun? And I have to say, based on what we know, it's hard to tell exactly at this point. I mean, if he's taking the gun out and pulling the trigger before they're even filming and things like that, that does seem like it could be criminal negligence, potentially. But as far as checking the gun, you had the armorer providing the gun. You had the assistant director yelling cold gun before taking the gun directly to Baldwin and telling him, hey, this is a cold gun. It's safe. As far as his ability to check it, actors are typically trained in how to use firearms and firearm safety before doing these kinds of shoots. But even then, are actors expected to know the difference between a live round and a dummy round, being able to always tell if a blank is there or not? Do they want actors fiddling with the gun, opening the cylinder and checking themselves? Maybe they think that could put them potentially in more danger, so they just leave that responsibility to the armorers. I have to say, I have a tough time saying that the actor should have more responsibility in checking that firearm than the armorer or the assistant director, and that chain of command involved in getting that gun to the actor. Now, obviously, these accidents do happen on movie sets, and it's actually fairly uncommon for people to be prosecuted in these instances. Who knows what's going to happen in this case? I have no idea, but it's just a tragedy. It's really sad to see somebody lost their life, a mother, a daughter, a sister. It's tragic. And about 4 years ago, Alec Baldwin tweeted this: I wonder how it must feel to wrongfully kill someone. Well, unfortunately, I think now he knows. By the way, guys, after editing this video, I came across an update from The Wrap. Rust shooting. Gun that killed Helena Hutchins was used that morning for live ammo target practice. The gun that killed Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins last Thursday was used by crew members that morning for live ammunition target practice, an individual with knowledge of the set told The Wrap. A number of crew members had taken prop guns from the New Mexico set of the indie Western, including the gun that killed Hutchins, to go plinking, a hobby in which people shoot at beer cans with live ammunition to pass the time, the insider said. So this would explain why there was live ammunition on the set, and this is not protocol. This seems to be violating all kinds of standard rules in Hollywood around gun safety. This is not a good look. Anyways, guys, that's the end of the video. Did you learn anything? Did you enjoy the video? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. Support us at nuancebro.com/join. It really does help out the channel. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time, bro.